Good. Okay. Good. Okay. And they can see the slides as well. So I was going to, following on from what Stavina's been saying, and talk about using R Markdown, bookdown to write. I put undergraduate book in the thing, but it's actually 3 books. My name's Duncan. I work in the Department of Computer Science, lecturer, and I've been experimenting over the last few years with 3 undergraduate books. First one is a LaTeX manual for first years, so something that our first years use to get up to speed with LaTeX. The next one is, second one is a book called Coding Your Future, which supports our tutorial system, but also is used throughout all 3 years of the undergraduate degree. And then the last one is a software engineering course, which is a compulsory course. So they're all slightly different beasts. But my journey on this started with this book, sometime between when this was first published in 2017 and the lockdown hit. I read this book and thought, oh, I was really, I was learning about R, and it's really nice to learn about R, but then there's this bookdown, it's really cool. It looks really nice. You'll see that the second edition of that book now is done with Quarto. So my guess is that Quarto will eventually probably replace R Markdown. I haven't jumped ship yet, but I think it will probably happen at some point in the future. The nice thing about this is you can view the source, you can go into the repositories and see how things have been done. So you can sort of, it's very easy to see what other people have done. I mean, not just that one, but other ones. So I started with the LaTeX manual. This is our LaTeX manual. I mean, calling it a book's probably a bit of a stretch. It's really just a lab manual that supports one lab. But we also then want that to be available to students when they come to write the final year report, because we teach them LaTeX in year 1, but we want them to continue using it, especially when they come to writing their final year report. So from doing this, it was a very pleasant experience. You've got 1 input, your R Markdown, and you get 4 outputs. You get your HTML, which is what you've just seen. You've got your PDF, your EPUB, and your Word document, and those outputs can be incredibly useful depending on what you're wanting to do. Part of the magic of the sort of bookdown ecosystem is that it integrates with Pandoc. I think Quarto also uses Pandoc as well, so that you can create multiple outputs from a single output. So it's using LaTeX and Knitr and RStudio and using a bit of GitHub there as well. And it all fits together nicely. You get free hosting with Netlify, which is quite nice if you want to use it. The thing that really struck me about this is the documentation is really, really good. So, I mean, there are other systems that do similar things, but they're not very well documented. So you can go onto Bookdown and you can see other books that people have published. There's a book about Bookdown, which is written in Bookdown. That's very good. And there's an R Markdown cookbook as well. So there's plenty of places you can go to look at examples and copy and paste code and play around with it. It also handles maths and code, various different ways of embedding code. You can embed code gist from GitHub, all sorts of things, nice referencing, proper figs, all the things you'd expect from a proper scientific technical publishing system. And it felt like escaping the Blackboard prison. I felt like Tim Robbins in The Shawshank Redemption. I crawled through this horrible sewer of learning management system, and I was a free man on the other side. Hallelujah! Finally escaped. So that felt like a big pro. So that was all right for me as a single author with a small book. It's only 5,000 words, 20 pages. It's pretty basic. And unfortunately, most of my collaborators and students are still stuck inside the Blackboard prison. They're still NMS inmates, so they're not free just yet. It remains to be seen what university replaces our current learning management system with. So what about multiple authors and bigger books? Can we do something a bit more ambitious than just a lab manual? So the second example here is a book called Coding Your Future. This is a guidebook for our undergraduate students to help them design, build, test, and code their future in computing. There's a big focus on, there is no exam for this course, so it's not a credit-bearing course, but I'm trying to prepare students for writing a CV. So can they write a CV that convinces someone to invite them to an interview, whether it's for a summer internship, a placement, or a graduate role? And then, having got that interview, can they then perform well in interviews? So I know the book's doing well if students are managing to get interviews and also get jobs as well. It's quite big. It's a lot bigger than the previous example. It's about 32 chapters. It's about 500 pages. I haven't printed it off, but it gives you an idea how big it is at the moment. It's 130,000 words. I don't expect all the students to read all of it. It's there as a reference. You know, some students will use some chapters quite heavily. Some of them won't even look at them at all, and that's something that's to be expected with a big textbook. It's got 400 figures, so there's quite a lot of illustration in it. Some of which is done with ggplot, some of it's done with an artist who's drawn some of the cartoons in the book. There's about, of those 400 figures, there's about 30 YouTube videos, some of which I've created myself, most of which are actually external third-party ones. And then there's some podcast interviews as well, so there's some audio where I interview students, and that's sort of part of the package. So on the pros, it works with multiple authors. So we've got multiple authors of the students who've sometimes contributed to stuff. Using this agile approach is quite good because rather than saying to students, yeah, I'm writing a book and it'll be ready in 5 years' time, I can just say, well, you know, it takes a long time to write a book, and where I'm at at the moment is currently available on there. I call it agile approach, which means it's not finished yet. So pull requests are welcome. So if you'd like to contribute, so students have contributed, and people outside the university have contributed as well, and we credit requests, pull requests that have been merged. I'm not actually using very much R, so I'm not much of an R expert. I'm using a little bit of ggplot to plot the old graph. There's a bit of mutate in there to pull things out of CSV files. I was using Cable, I think it was, that Stavrina mentioned, to do tables. But it's kind of quite nice because you don't actually have to use much R at all if you don't want. But then the full power of R is there if you need it at a later stage. And there are similar systems. So I mentioned that you don't actually need R at all. There are similar systems like ASCII Doctor that do the same sort of thing. I don't think they're as well documented as R Markdown is. And for this particular example, I bought a domain. So although it's hosted on Netlify, I've mapped the domain to a one that I bought. And that's enabled me to do some sort of teaching analytics. So rather than using Google Analytics to see what students are clicking on, and I'm using something called Pausable, which is basically sort of Google Analytics, but a lot more usable and lightweight. Just a bit of JavaScript you put in the HTML so you can see what students are clicking on. I like the fact that it's free. I like the fact there's no login, there's no registration, there's no paywall. That's something that's easy to do in this particular example, not the next example I'm going to talk about. So that was quite nice. And on the con side, this is self-publishing. It might be hard to find a publisher who's willing to publish it. So if I do decide to publish it as a printed book, and there may be some value in doing that, if only to get promoted, or perhaps to I think some students do actually prefer having a print-based book where, you know, spending a lot of time in front of the screen, it's nice to have a printed copy. Having it all available freely on the internet might, you know, restrict the number of publishers who are interested in publishing your work, because how are they going to make any money out of it if it's all free already anyway? And then it's not really clear how many students need or want a paper book. I think it's probably a small but probably quite vocal minority of people that might want a paper-based book. There's a really annoying bug in YouTube video embedding that some change in an R update that I installed meant that although I can embed YouTube videos in the online HTML version, I can't embed videos in the PDF, the EPUB, and the Word. So actually, despite the fact that I can create all these outputs, actually I've only got one output at the moment because of this bug. So I'm struggling with that bug if anyone would like to help me. And I think, going back to what Stavrina was saying about Quarto, I think at some point it seems inevitable that R Markdown, although it's been around longer, will, you know, be superseded by Quarto. I think it seems to be the way things are going. They haven't said as much, but it seems to be the writings on the wall for R Markdown. And then the next step is to add interactive Q&A. So add some interactive Q&A to the book. So whether that's through something like Shiny apps, for example, from R, or using something like Mentimeter, or using something that's integrated into the Blackboard or whatever learning management system it gets replaced with, or something else completely. So that's something about the future. So my last example is this one. This is a software engineering course. I didn't write this book. All I did was convert some files that Suzanne Embry, who did write the course and led the course, converted them from LaTeX into this so that students could have it all in one place. It's a compulsory course, so it's something that students have to do as part of their degree. There is an exam, there is coursework that's part of this, so it needs to sit a lot nicer with our learning management system. A little bit more, about 25 chapters. I think it's about 50,000 words, although I couldn't get the word count to work this morning. There's about 150 figures, so it's sizable. Putting all that stuff into our Markdown was worth it because it's now searchable and browsable. What was there before was a load of PDFs, 20 different PDFs on Blackboard, and it was a bit of a nightmare for students to navigate. And frankly, it was a bit of a nightmare for us to manage as well. So having it all in one place is good, searchable, browsable. It was really useful having this available to people outside of the university. So as part of this course, the students get a software engineering mentor who comes in and sits with them and looks at their code repository. And it's much easier to do that if they can see what we're teaching them and say, well, this is the lab manual, this is what they're using, this is what we're teaching them, this is why we're teaching them it, then it can help them understand it a little bit better. And for this particular version, we're doing something a bit more sophisticated. For the version you saw before, I'm just running it on RStudio on my local machine. This version is running automated builds on the server. So our multiple authors just write in Markdown, and when they push to GitHub, that then triggers a build on the server. So you don't even need to have RStudio installed. All you need is Visual Studio or whatever or VS Studio to edit Markdown files. On the con side, our co-authors need training, so not all of our co-authors were familiar with R Markdown, so that was probably still is a bit of an ongoing battle. And when you're authoring stuff for multiple output formats, you need to think carefully about, not just making it work on the web, but making it work on various other things as well. I've noticed that some firewalls seem to block .netlify app, so some of our mentors were coming from investment banks, and they didn't like the look of that URL, so it might help to map bought a domain and mapped it to something. And the integration with the LMS is pretty basic. So in Blackboard, we just link out to the textbook, and that's it. It's not very sophisticated integration. You could do something more sophisticated. So you can say, if you've got a bunch of questions at the end of a chapter, you might want to know how many of my students have done question 3 on chapter 7, for example. That's something that would take a lot more work to do, integrating it more with the coursework, the summative and formative coursework. At the moment, they're sort of completely separate beasts, which isn't ideal, but it sort of works. Right, so to conclude then, to finish up, I think bookdown and Quarto, I guess I'm preaching to the converted here because a lot of people probably already use them, but they're mature tools that help you publish books. They can help you overcome some of the limitations of Blackboard if you're having to struggle with using Blackboard. The next steps for us is, as I say, to add some interactive Q&A to them, integrate it better with our LMS. It's kind of a bit of an open question as to what is a book these days. As a computer scientist, I see a book as a piece of software and the paper is this kind of byproduct, especially when you've got video and audio in your book. It's kind of what is a book is seems to be a bit of an open question. So just to finish up, I looked on Stack Overflow to see questions tagged on certain topics. So at the moment, there are 700 questions about Quarto. There are 1,000 questions on Bookdown. There's 10,000 questions on R Markdown. So this is sort of one advantage of using R Markdown at the moment is it's a mature product. There are more people using it, so you can get help. Maybe you can get help easier, I don't know. Compared with ggplot, has got 52,000 questions, and jQuery has got a whopping 1 million questions. I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing, actually, but yes. So thank you, Kamilla, for organising these sessions, and thank you for listening. Happy to answer any questions.